In the 41st millennium, there is only war. The Imperium has survived 10,000 years through one unshakable principle: control the uncontrollable or destroy it. They had faced demon incursions that tore reality apart. They had witnessed hive fleets that devoured stars. They had endured the Necron awakening and the birth of the Great Rift itself. But they had never encountered something like this, something that was neither warp-born nor material, neither living nor dead, but the fundamental force that existed between both states. They had never faced the Phoenix. It began above Armageddon, where the ash wastes still bore scars from Gazkul's third invasion. Astropaths across 3 sectors simultaneously combusted, their dying screams forming a single, impossible word in 10,000 languages. Rebirth. The Astronomicon flickered. Not dimmed, flickered, like a candle in a hurricane, something that had not occurred since the Emperor first sat upon the Golden Throne. Navigator Hesia Valdane was guiding the strike cruiser. Unrelenting virtue through the system when her third eye opened without her permission. She saw it then, burning in the space between real and unreal. A firebird of cosmic scale, wings spread across light years, every feather a galaxy dying and being born again in the same instant. It was rapturous. It was agony. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever witnessed, and it was killing her. "Something comes," she whispered, blood streaming from her eyes, her nose, her ears. Something that was never meant to be here. The warp screams in terror. The materium recoils, and yet it comes, and it is magnificent. She died with a smile. The Phoenix Force emerged into real space like a nuclear detonation in reverse. Instead of expanding outward, reality contracted inward around its manifestation, space-time folding and twisting to accommodate something that should not exist. Within the laws of physics, the Imperium understood. The entity took form, a cosmic raptor composed of flames that burned in colors the human eye had no names for. Psychic energy so dense, it achieved physical mass, power that made plasma reactors look like candle flames. It did not speak. It did not need to. Its presence was a declaration written in the fundamental forces of the universe. On Armageddon's surface, Canoness Arabella Stark of the Order of the Sacred Rose was overseeing the reconstruction of Hive Infernus when the sky caught fire. Not metaphorically, the entire sky became a sheet of cosmic flame, rolling and undulating like an ocean of pure power. Her power armor's auto senses screamed warnings about radiation levels that should have vaporized the planet instantly. Yet the temperature hadn't changed. The flames weren't destroying. They were simply present, demonstrating their capacity for destruction without exercising it. "Get every soul into the temples," she commanded, her voice steady despite the apocalypse overhead. "This is a test of faith. The Emperor will—" The Phoenix descended. It didn't attack. It didn't communicate. It simply moved downward, and where it passed, impossible things occurred. A bombed-out section of the hive spontaneously reconstructed itself, not as it had been, but as something greater. Gothic architecture merged with organic curves, stone that breathed, metal that grew like living tissue. The sick and dying in a Medicae facility found their wounds closing, their augmetics becoming living flesh again, their bodies restored to peak condition without explanation or permission. A space marine of the Celestial Lions, veteran of 3 centuries, watched in shock as his bionic arm, lost to an orc power claw decades ago, dissolved into golden ash and reformed as flesh and bone and muscle, perfect and whole. He clenched his restored fist, feeling sensations he'd forgotten existed. "What sorcery is this?" he breathed. The Phoenix didn't answer. It had no interest in individual questions. It continued its descent toward the planet's core, where the greatest concentration of humanity existed, drawn by something primal, the desperate, suffering psychers chained in the black ship's holds, awaiting transport to Terra, to the soul-binding, to becoming fuel for the Golden Throne. Their psychic screams of terror and agony were a beacon the Phoenix could not ignore. Inquisitor Covenant arrived within 6 hours, his retinue comprising 2 Grey Knight Terminators, an entire platoon of stormtroopers, and authorization to enact exterminatus if necessary. He stood in the reconstructed section of Hive, examining walls that seemed to pulse with inner light, touching metal that felt warm and alive. "This is not warp corruption," his sanctioned psyker, Malachi, reported, his voice shaking. "Lord Inquisitor, I don't know what this is. It registers as neither Chaos Taint nor Xenos technology. It's pure, terrifyingly pure. It's power without agenda, force without malice. And it's barely noticed us at all." Covenant drew his bolt pistol. "Then we must make it notice. Nothing this powerful can be allowed to operate freely in Imperial space. Alert the Lord Commander. Prepare planetary evacuation protocols, and summon every psyker we have. I want to know what this thing wants before I'm forced to kill an entire world to stop it." Above them, the Phoenix Force coiled around Armageddon like a serpent of cosmic fire, neither hostile nor benevolent, simply existing with such intensity that existence itself had to accommodate it. It had come to the 41st millennium, a universe of eternal stagnation and decay, bearing the promise and threat of something humanity had abandoned long ago: transformation. The Astronomicon flickered again. This time, every astropath in the Segmentum Ultima received the same vision: a firebird rising from the ashes of humanity itself, and the Emperor's skull throne cracking like an egg. In the Gothic sector, a radical inquisitor named Calistrati reviewed the reports and whispered a prayer to the Emperor, not for protection, but for forgiveness for what she was about to do. She began drafting orders to capture the Phoenix, or at least study it, consequences be damned. On the unrelenting Virtue, the new navigator struggled to find her bearings in the warp, but every path she looked upon showed the same destination: Terra. The Phoenix was going to the throne world, and nothing in this universe or any other would stop it. If you crave stories of cosmic collisions that shake the very foundations of the 41st millennium, smash that subscribe button. The Emperor protects those who bear witness to the Dark Millennium, and what comes next will redefine everything you thought you knew about power in the age of the Imperium. The Phoenix Force moved through the galaxy like a comet of pure thought, leaving sectors changed in its wake. Imperial Navy vessels that attempted to intercept it found their weapons simply cease to function, not destroyed, but fundamentally altered at the molecular level into harmless sculptures of their former selves. A dozen macro cannons became intricate lattices of crystallized iron, beautiful and useless. The crews remained unharmed, merely witnesses to a power that rendered their violence irrelevant. It took 3 weeks to reach Terra, though time moved strangely in the Phoenix's presence. Chronometers went mad. Astropaths reported experiencing the journey in reverse, seeing the destination before the departure. The entity's path through real space left a wake of psychic turbulence that both calmed and terrified the warp. Storms dissipated in its passage, yet the ruinous powers watched with something approaching concern. The High Lords of Terra convened an emergency session 14 light-years before the Phoenix would arrive. Lord Commander Militant Titus Andronicus, a grim veteran of the Macarian Crusade, slammed his augmetic fist on the council table hard enough to crack the ancient wood. "We mobilize every asset in the Sol system," he declared. "Phalanx, every ship of Battlefleet Solar, the Custodian Guard. We end this threat before it reaches Holy Terra." "It has regenerated destroyed worlds," Master of the Administratum Helveticus countered, his voice strained. It restored life to a scorched hive with a thought. Our weapons are meaningless against such power. Then we will die with weapons in hand rather than bow to a Xenos entity. Fabricator General Yvette Dorn, her form more machine than flesh, raised a mechadendrite for silence. Her binary cant translated through Vox speakers. This entity is not Xenos. It does not register as biological, synthetic, or warp-born. It exists outside our categorical understanding. I propose observation before obliteration. The council erupted into argument. Through it all, the Captain General of the Adeptus Custodes, Valoris himself, remained silent. He had already made his decision. The Phoenix would reach Terra, and when it did, he and his 10,000 would stand between it and the Emperor. They would hold for 10 seconds or 10,000 years. It made no difference. That was their purpose. What none of them knew was that the Phoenix Force had no interest in conquest or destruction. It was drawn to Terra by the most powerful psychic beacon in the universe. Yes, but not for the reasons they feared. The entity operated on fundamental principles: death and rebirth, ending and beginning, the eternal cycle. And on Terra, it sensed something that violated everything it represented. The Emperor was dying, but could not die. Living, but not alive. Sustaining, but not sustained. He was a wound in the cycle, a soul trapped in perpetual agony, denied both the release of death and the possibility of rebirth. To the Phoenix Force, this was not just tragic, it was wrong on a cosmic scale. The entity breached the Sol system's outer defenses without acknowledging they existed. Phalanx opened fire with every weapon in its arsenal. Lance batteries that could crack continents, Nova cannons that could shatter moons. The Phoenix simply absorbed the energy, grew brighter, and continued forward. The ancient space fortress ceased firing, not because it was destroyed, but because every member of its crew simultaneously understood the futility of their actions. On Terra itself, in the Imperial Palace, the 10,000 took their positions. Golden armor gleamed in the eternal twilight of humanity's birth world. Guardian spears hummed with disruptor fields. Valoris stood at the Eternity Gate itself, the final barrier before the Sanctum Imperialis, where the Emperor suffered his endless vigil. "Whatever comes," he said to his warriors, "we do not yield, even if the stars die. We hold this gate." The Phoenix Force manifested above the Imperial Palace as a bird of cosmic fire, so vast it could be seen from the opposite hemisphere. It did not attack, it did not rage. It simply descended, gently, purposefully, like a parent approaching a sick child. The psychic pressure was immense. Across Terra, billions of souls felt something pressing against their minds, not intrusive, not violent, but present with undeniable weight. In the black ship's holding cells, psychers wept with sensations they couldn't name. In the navigator houses, every third eye opened simultaneously. In the Astronomicon chamber, the choir faltered for 3 full seconds before resuming their agonizing duty. And in the Sanctum Imperialis, for the first time in 10,000 years, the Emperor's psychic presence shifted. It was not speech. It was not movement. But every custodian felt it. A flicker of something beyond endless pain, beyond eternal duty. Curiosity, recognition. The emotions of a being so vast and ancient were impossible to interpret clearly, but the message was unmistakable. Let it approach. Valoris's hands tightened on his guardian spear. His orders were absolute. Protect the Emperor at all costs. But the Emperor's will was more absolute still. With a gesture that cost him more than any battle in his 3,000-year life, he commanded the Eternity Gate to open. The Phoenix Force entered the Sanctum Imperialis like dawn breaking after an endless night. The chamber, vast enough to hold entire armies, seemed suddenly small in the presence of the cosmic entity. The golden throne stood at its center, and upon it, the master of mankind, wasted flesh wrapped around psychic might beyond comprehension, a god corpse that could not die, a father who had outlived his sons and his dream. The Phoenix circled the throne, examining, understanding. It saw what he had become. Not a man anymore, barely a god, but a battery of souls, consuming 10,000 psychers daily just to maintain the Astronomicon, to keep his psychic presence powerful enough to hold the webway gate closed, to sustain the Imperium's last desperate hope. It saw the agony, the endless, infinite, crushing agony of a consciousness that should have died millennia ago, but could not be released because his death would doom humanity. And the Phoenix Force understood. This was a sacrifice frozen in time, a moment of death stretched across 10,000 years, a cycle interrupted and left to rot. For the first time since entering this universe, the Phoenix Force communicated. Not in words, but in pure concept, broadcast to every psyker on Terra and felt by every soul in the Sol system. Wrong. This is wrong. Death must come. Rebirth must follow. The cycle demands it. The Emperor's response came not as words, but as psychic force powerful enough to shake the foundations of the palace. Images flooded outward. Humanity's fragility, the predators in the dark, the necessity of his suffering, the Imperium's need for his sacrifice. A father showing his reasons for enduring hell itself. The Phoenix acknowledged these truths and rejected them. Life finds a way. It always does. You have forgotten this. You have become stagnation itself. Valoris stepped forward, guardian spear raised. Entity, you will withdraw from the Emperor's presence, or we will. The Phoenix turned its attention to him, and the Captain General of the Adeptus Custodes, the most powerful warrior in the Imperium, staggered under the weight of its regard. It showed him something, a vision of what the Emperor could become. Not dead, not undying, but renewed, reborn, transformed into something greater than he had been. A true god, not a corpse on a throne. But the price would be catastrophic. The Astronomicon would go dark. The webway gate would open. Terra might burn. Millions, no, billions, could die in the transformation. No, Valoris breathed. The cost is too high. The Phoenix's response was simple. The cost of this stagnation is higher. You simply pay it more slowly. And then, before the custodians could react, before the High Lords could mobilize, before the Imperium could mount any defense, the Phoenix Force did something that would echo across the galaxy. It touched the Golden Throne, and the Emperor's psychic scream of recognition shook the warp itself. The psychic shockwave from the Phoenix's touch rippled through the immaterium like a nuclear detonation in a still pond. In the warp, the ruinous powers felt it instantly, a presence that was neither ally nor enemy, neither corruptible nor destroyable. It simply was, existing with such fundamental certainty that even the Chaos Gods paused in their eternal game. Tzeentch, Lord of Change, saw 10,000 futures collapse into one impossible strand. Nurgle, grandfather of plagues, watched the cycle of decay interrupted by something that understood cycles better than he did. Khorne sensed power beyond mortal bloodshed, beyond even divine rage. And Slaanesh, youngest and hungriest of the four, felt something that had never once registered in the Prince of Pleasure's domain. Disinterest. The Phoenix Force did not desire. It did not crave. It simply enacted its purpose. This could not be tolerated. In the warp, above the roiling madness of the Eye of Terror, the four convened in a way they rarely did, not in cooperation, but in shared concern. Their demon princes, their greater demons, their endless legions of corruption all turned toward a single purpose. understand this intruder, corrupt it, or destroy it. Kairos Fate Weaver, the Oracle of Tzeentch, spoke with both heads simultaneously, past and future merging. It exists outside causality as we shape it. The past does not bind it. The future does not seduce it. It is immune to the great game. Then we shall test that immunity, rumbled a voice like grinding stone and burning brass. Skarbrand the Exiled, Khorne's rage-given form. Nothing is immune to violence. Nothing. Nurgle's garden stirred, and from the fetid soil emerged Kugath Plaguefather, riding his great palanquin of disease. Perhaps corruption is not the path. Perhaps accommodation. This phoenix brings change, and change is merely accelerated decay. We could work with it. You are all fools, hissed Inkari, Slaanesh's favored keeper of secrets. It does not negotiate. It does not hunger. But where it touches reality, possibility blooms, and in possibility, we find opportunity. The four reached a rare consensus. The Phoenix Force would be brought into the warp, willingly or otherwise, and there they would demonstrate that nothing escapes chaos forever. The plague planet of Mauritania, once an imperial agri-world, now a festering tribute to Nurgle, felt the Phoenix's presence first. The entity had not come seeking the world. It was simply moving through real space, drawn toward clusters of suffering, toward places where the cycle had been broken. And Mauritania, where death was denied and decay stretched into eternal mockery of life, drew the Phoenix like a lodestone. It manifested in the skies above the putrid capital city, and for the first time since Mortarion had claimed this world for the plague god, something impossible happened. The rot stopped spreading. The Death Guard plague marines in the cathedral hive felt it immediately. Their armor, perpetually dripping with blessed corruption, ceased its weeping. The nurgling infestations that lived in their guts went silent. The diseases that gave them such terrible power, the blessings of their god, suddenly felt foreign. Not gone, but questioned, as if the universe itself was asking, why should decay not end? Why should death not bring rebirth? Captain Vulgus of the Wretched, 700 years in Nurgle's service, watched in horror as one of his brothers collapsed, the centuries of disease finally completing their work. The Marine died, truly died, his body decomposing to dust in seconds rather than continuing as an eternal host for plague. No, Vulgus breathed through his respirator. No, this is not Grandfather's way. This is not the garden's blessing. The Phoenix descended toward the surface, and where its light touched, Nurgle's gifts burned away. Not cleansed, the Phoenix had no concept of purity or corruption, but completed. The eternal cycle of decay was allowed to finish, to reach its natural conclusion. Death, then dissolution, then the potential for new growth. The planet's surface, choked with diseased vegetation that never died but never truly lived, suddenly erupted with genuine death. Entire forests of plagued growth collapsed, composted, and in their decay, tiny shoots of clean green life emerged. Real life, temporary life, mortal life. From the plague planet's warp rift, a voice rolled out like an avalanche of phlegm and affection. Little firebird, you misunderstand. Death is not an ending. It is a transformation into my embrace. Come, let Grandfather show you the true meaning of the cycle. Nurgle's form emerged from the rift, not fully, for even his least manifestation would shatter a world, but enough to make his presence undeniable. A mass of fecund decay, weeping sores that birthed new diseases, smiling with 1,000 festering mouths, arms spread wide in welcoming embrace. The Phoenix Force regarded the Chaos God with something that might have been curiosity. Here was a being that claimed to understand the cycle, that spoke of death and transformation. But the Phoenix saw through the lie immediately. Nurgle did not embrace death. He denied it. He stretched decay into eternity, made suffering endless, transformed the moment of dissolution into an infinite torture of never quite dying. "You understand nothing," the Phoenix responded, and its voice carried power that made reality shudder. "You have made decay your throne, but decay is not an end unto itself. It is the bridge between death and life. You have built a kingdom in the transition and called it eternal. It is obscene." Nurgle's laugh was warm, paternal, and utterly mad. "Oh, but little one, eternity is the gift. My children need never fear true death. They persist, they endure, The Phoenix force ignited. Not with normal flame, not with heat that merely burned, but with the fundamental fire of existence itself, the energy that fueled stars, that powered the Big Bang, that stood at the moment of creation and destruction and laughed at the difference between them. It swept across Mauritania, not to cleanse, but to complete, allowing 10,000 years of interrupted decay to finish in 10 seconds. The planet died. Truly, fully, completely died. Every plagued organism, every corrupted human, every demon-touched stone, all of it disintegrated into component atoms, then into pure energy, then into nothing at all. And from that nothing, the Phoenix wove something new. A dead world, yes, but a clean dead world, ready for the cycle to begin again. Nurgle recoiled, his manifestation shrieking as his connection to the planet was severed not through violence, but through completion. The suffering he fed upon was ended, the eternal decay brought to conclusion, and his power found no purchase on a world that had been allowed to properly die. "Impossible," the plague god roared, his jovial demeanor cracking into genuine rage. "Nothing escapes my garden. Nothing ends without my permission." "I do not require your permission," the Phoenix responded. "I am what was before you. I am what will be after you. I am the cycle itself, and you are merely a parasite that has grown fat on its interruption." The warp around Mauritania boiled with fury. From 3 other directions, the remaining Chaos Gods manifested their attention. Khorne's rage, Tzeentch's schemes, Slaanesh's hunger, all converging on this entity that dared to reject their domains. The Phoenix Force spread its wings across the dead world, and for the first time since entering this universe, it prepared for genuine battle. Not against mortals who could be ignored, not against ships that could be bypassed, but against the fundamental powers that ruled the warp itself. The 4 moved as one, a rare coordination born of shared threat. Bloodthirsters poured from Khorne's domain, wearing reality like a dying garment. Tzeentch wove spells that rewrote causality, making the Phoenix's past victories into future defeats. Slaanesh sent temptations beyond mortal comprehension, offering the Phoenix everything it could desire if it would only submit. And Nurgle encircled the dead planet with a garden that would swallow even stellar fire. The Phoenix Force regarded the assembled might of the Chaos Gods, powers that had terrorized the galaxy for millions of years, that had corrupted space marines, destroyed worlds, and brought entire civilizations to ruin, and it burned brighter. The cosmic firebird expanded, its form shifting from bird to nebula to abstract concept of flame itself. It met the demon hordes not with violence, but with fundamental rejection. Where bloodthirsters struck, their rage found nothing to ignite against. Rage required an object, and the Phoenix was not an object, but a force. Where Tzeentch's spells attempted to alter reality, they found the Phoenix existed beneath reality, in the quantum foundations where change itself was born. Where Slaanesh offered pleasures and pains, the Phoenix demonstrated the ultimate disinterest. It had no desires to corrupt, because it was not a being, but a process. And when Nurgle's garden reached out to embrace and corrupt, the Phoenix showed the Chaos Gods something they had never truly witnessed: genuine, complete, terrifying finality. Not death as they understood it, not transition into the warp, not transformation into demonic essence, not eternal suffering, but actual ending, followed by actual beginning, the cycle turning without their interference. A section of Nurgle's garden burned away completely, leaving not corrupted soil, but possibility itself. Blank existence that could become anything, free from chaos's taint, because it had been reduced to pure potential. The four recoiled simultaneously. This was a power they could not corrupt because it rejected the very premise of chaos, that change and decay and rage and desire were ends unto themselves. The Phoenix demonstrated that they were merely stages in a greater cycle, and that cycle acknowledged no masters. From his flagship in the Eye of Terror, Abaddon the Despoiler watched the psychic conflagration and felt something he had not experienced in millennia: doubt. If the gods themselves could not contain this entity, what hope did the material servants of chaos have? On Terra, in the Sanctum Imperialis, the Emperor felt the Chaos God's failure, and something like grim satisfaction pulsed through his psychic presence. The Phoenix had demonstrated something he had always known, but could never prove. The ruinous powers were not all powerful. They were powerful, yes, but not supreme. And now something truly supreme had entered the galaxy. The question was, would it be humanity's salvation or their extinction? The Phoenix Force's rejection of chaos rippled across the galaxy with psychic force that registered on every astropathic relay from Ultramar to the Eastern Fringe. Xeno civilizations, some so ancient they remembered the war in heaven, felt the disturbance and turned their attention toward the phenomenon that had made the Chaos Gods themselves retreat. On Craftworld Ulthwé, Eldrad Ulthrin, eldest of the Farseers, stood before the Infinity Circuit with his hands trembling, a sight none of his disciples had ever witnessed. The ancient Eldar's mind raced through the skeins of fate, tracing probability threads that stretched across millennia, and every single path now converged on a singular, blinding point of quantum uncertainty. "It cannot be," he whispered in the Eldar tongue, his voice carrying harmonics of disbelief and terrible recognition. The prophecy of the forgotten cycle, the Inead that is not Yinead, the fire that burns away both life and death to reveal what lies beneath. His apprentice, Farseer Taldir, approached cautiously. "Master, what have you seen?" "Something that was old when our gods were young," Eldrad replied, his eyes distant. "The humans call it Phoenix. We have another name, Asuria's Echo, the original flame from which all lesser fires descend. Our Phoenix Lords took their name from fragmentary legends of this very force, and now it walks the materium in its totality, and every prophecy I have read for 3,000 years has become meaningless noise." He turned to face the Council of Seers. "Ulthwé must respond. If this entity reaches the webway, if it encounters our people with the same indifference it showed chaos, we may face a transformation more complete than anything Slaanesh accomplished. It does not destroy for malice. It completes what was meant to end and begins what was meant to start. We are a dying race clinging to immortality through spirit stones. What happens when an entity of death and rebirth decides our time has come?" The council erupted in debate, but Eldrad silenced them with a gesture. "I will go to it, alone if necessary. We must understand its purpose before it decides ours for us." Across the galaxy, in the cold mathematics of Necron tomb worlds, probability engines performed calculations that should have been impossible. The Silent King, Zarek, stood in his throne room aboard the Purian Eternals, examining data that his cryptex assured him was accurate despite being paradoxical. This entity, he spoke in the hollow voice of one long divorced from flesh, registers power signatures equivalent to a shard of a cetan, yet it bears none of their corruption, none of their hunger. It simply is. His Triarch Praetorian Altix projected holographic analysis. My king, the entity's energy manipulation capabilities exceed anything recorded in the Aldari archives we recovered. It converted matter to energy, to matter again at stellar scales. It rejected the warp entities through what appears to be fundamental reality assertion. And most concerning, it completed death on Mauritania. Truly completed it. Every Necron sensor confirms that world cycle finished. It could theoretically do the same to us. Zarek was silent for a long moment. For 60 million years, the Necrons had endured as deathless machines, waiting for the great work to restore them to flesh. But what if this Phoenix decided their time as machines had ended? What if it saw their immortality as another interrupted cycle, another stagnation requiring completion? We observe, the Silent King commanded, and we prepare. If this entity threatens the great work, we will respond with the full might of the dynasties. But for now, we watch. The galaxy has not seen this kind of power since the Citan walked uncharted. We must understand before we act. In the void between galaxies, the Tyranid Hive Fleet Leviathan felt something it had never experienced: psychic pain. The hive mind, vast beyond comprehension, stretched across multiple galaxies simultaneously, consuming and adapting and growing without end. It had devoured countless worlds, absorbed trillions of organisms, faced every weapon and defense the galaxy could produce. But when the Phoenix Force burned away Mauritania, when it completed the cycle of death that Nurgle had stretched into eternity, the hive mind felt something die that it could not reclaim. Biomass that had been absorbed, genocode that had been integrated, all of it simply ended. Not destroyed in the conventional sense, ended at a fundamental level, reduced to base components that held no information, no sustenance, nothing the hive could use. The Tyranids did not fear. Fear was a survival mechanism, and the hive mind was beyond such limitations. But it recognized threat, and it recognized something more dangerous: limitation. The Phoenix represented something the hive mind could not consume, could not adapt to, could not integrate. It was antithetical to the Tyranid philosophy of endless consumption and growth. Hive Fleet Leviathan shifted its trajectory. Billions of organisms across dozens of tendril fleets reoriented toward the Phoenix's last known location. If this entity could not be consumed, it must be avoided. And if it could not be avoided, the hive mind would learn whether even cosmic fire could withstand the weight of 10 trillion hungry organisms. On the Tau Sept world of To itself, Aunva, the Ethereal Supreme, convened an emergency session of the Ethereal Council. Before them, projected in holographic perfection, played footage captured by a stealth team that had been observing Imperial movements near Terra. The Mon-K call it Phoenix, Anva intoned, his aged voice carrying weight beyond his physical frailty. But observe, it does not conquer, it does not enslave. It simply exists, and existence itself must accommodate it. This is not the behavior of a predator or a conqueror. This is something else entirely. Commander Shadowson, present as military advisor, studied the footage with tactical precision. With respect, honored Ethereal, its intentions are irrelevant if its actions threaten the greater good. This entity burned an entire world to ash. To completion, interrupted Aunva. The world was dying. It allowed that death to finish. There is a difference, Commander, between destruction and conclusion. The Imperium fears it because humans fear change. But we of the Tau understand that the galaxy must evolve. Perhaps this phoenix is evolution itself given form. You propose alliance with this entity. I propose understanding. Dispatch Ambassador Cor Elmian with full authority to make contact. If this phoenix can be reasoned with, if it can be shown the vision of the greater good, it may be the catalyst we need to unite the galaxy. And if it cannot, Aunva's ancient eyes hardened. Then we will know we face something beyond diplomacy, and we will respond accordingly. The Phoenix Force, unaware and uncaring of the galactic attention it had garnered, continued its path through real space. It had touched Terra, had felt the Emperor's agonized stasis, and had withdrawn to process what it discovered. The Emperor was too vast, too critical to the Imperium's survival, too anchored by 10,000 years of collective human faith. To complete his cycle would require more than simple contact. It would require transformation on a scale that might shatter human civilization. The entity needed to understand this universe better, needed to see what humanity had become, what forces held them in place, what possibilities existed beyond the Imperium's rigid control. And so it followed the psychic threads of suffering, drawn toward the black ships that even now carried their doomed cargo toward Terra. The ship Penitent Redemption was 3 weeks from Sol when the Phoenix manifested beside it, dwarfing the kilometer-long vessel like a mountain beside a pebble. Captain Hesius, a career black ship commander of 40 years, watched the entity approach and felt his augmetic heart, installed after his 3rd cardiac arrest from psychic backlash, skip several beats. "All hands to battle stations," he commanded, though his voice betrayed the futility he felt. "And someone get me a line to the Inquisition, now." The Phoenix did not attack. It simply observed, its cosmic attention focused on the ship's holds, where hundreds of psychers lay chained and drugged, awaiting their fate. These were not the powerful ones, not the individuals strong enough to be sanctioned or trained. These were the failures, the too weak or too dangerous, destined to be rendered down into fuel for the Golden Throne. Their terror and despair created a psychic miasma that leaked through even the ship's hexagrammic wards. The Phoenix felt their suffering, and for the first time since entering this universe, it experienced something approaching emotion, recognition. These souls were like kindling, meant for a fire that would never warm them, only consume them. Their deaths served a purpose. Yes, kept the Emperor alive, kept the Astronomicon burning, kept humanity's dream flickering in the dark. But they died without transformation, without rebirth, without the possibility of becoming something new. They were fuel, nothing more. "This is inefficient," the Phoenix broadcast, its thought voice touching every mind aboard the ship. "There are better ways. I will show you." Before Captain Hesius could react, before the Psychers could scream, before the inquisitorial seal-bearers could initiate their deadman protocols, the Phoenix Force reached out with a single tendril of cosmic fire and touched the ship's holds. And 300 doomed Psychers simultaneously ignited with power they'd never possessed, transformed in an instant from failures into something the Imperium had never seen. Not sanctioned Psychers, not Emperor-touched, not demon-corrupted, but Phoenix-chosen, individuals who burned with a fraction of the cosmic entity's power, their deaths postponed, their potential unlocked, their fates rewritten. The Imperium, already reeling from the Phoenix's confrontation with chaos, now faced a new horror. The entity was not content to simply exist. It was going to change things. And from Ulthwé, Eldrad Ulthrin felt the transformation occur and whispered a prayer to gods long dead. It has chosen to act. The galaxy will never be the same. The transformation of the Penitent Redemption's cargo was not an ascension, not a blessing, not a curse. It was a fundamental rewriting of what those Psychers were meant to become. The Phoenix Force did not grant them power as a gift. It simply removed the artificial barriers that had prevented their potential from manifesting correctly. Where the Imperium saw weakness requiring culling, the Phoenix saw incomplete development requiring completion. Psyker Designate 4471 Gamma, born Mira Castellan on an agri-world before the Black Ships came, opened her eyes to find herself wreathed in flames that did not burn. Her mind, once barely able to light a candle without risking demonic possession, now touched the warp with absolute clarity. She could feel the immaterium, yes, but she also felt something else, something between the warp and reality, a space where the Phoenix dwelled that was neither wholly material nor wholly psychic. "What have you done to us?" she whispered, her voice carrying harmonics that made the ship's hull resonate. "Completed you," the Phoenix responded, its attention already moving onward. "You were seeds that would never germinate. Now you may grow. What you become is your choice." And then it was gone, departing toward the next cluster of suffering it sensed, leaving chaos in its wake. Captain Hesius stared at the holding cells through the security feeds, watching 300 individuals who should have been drugged, restrained, and psychically nullified, instead standing freely, their bonds having simply dissolved. They moved with coordination, with purpose, with a collective awareness that terrified him more than any demon incursion. "Sound the alarm," he said quietly, "and pray someone with authority arrives before they realize what they can do." But Mira and her fellow Phoenix Touched were not interested in violence. They felt the captain's fear, felt the crew's terror, felt the inquisitorial agents preparing to execute exterminatus protocols rather than let them reach Terra. And they understood. The Imperium could not tolerate what they had become. Change was heresy. Transformation was corruption. To be remade by anything other than the Emperor was damnation. "We need to leave," Mira said to the others, and they agreed without words, their minds touching in ways that would have triggered demonic possession before the Phoenix's intervention, but now felt clean, pure, purposeful. "The ship, the crew, they'll kill themselves rather than let us continue. We have to go." "Go where?" asked another Phoenix Touched, a young man who had been crying in his chains only minutes before. "We're in the void. There's nowhere to—" Mira felt it then. A path. Not through real space, not through the warp, but through that strange in-between place where the Phoenix existed. A network of quantum possibilities, thin places where reality was flexible enough to bend without breaking. The webway, the Eldar called it, though this was something else, something newer, something the Phoenix had created simply by existing in this universe. "We make our own way," she said, and 300 Phoenix-touched psychers vanished from the penitent redemption in a flash of cosmic fire, leaving behind only the acrid scent of ozone and the crew's screaming alarms. They emerged on a dead world in the Ultima Segmentum, a planet that had been virus-bombed during the Horus Heresy and left to rot for 10,000 years. The Phoenix Touched stood on poisoned soil beneath a toxic sky and felt, through their new connection, that this place could be healed, that death could be completed here, and life could begin again. "The Phoenix showed us we don't have to be fuel," Mira said to her companions, her voice carrying across the dead landscape. "We can be something else, something new. But the Imperium will come for us. They always do." "Then we give them a choice," said an older psyker, a woman who had lived 60 years before the Black Ships found her. "Transform with us, or watch the galaxy evolve without them." Across the Imperium, 7 other Black Ships reported the same phenomenon. The Phoenix Force moved between them like a gardener pruning dead branches, touching the condemned psychers and completing their development. In total, nearly 3,000 Phoenix Touched emerged, scattering across the galaxy as the entity's attention continued its inexorable path. and that path led inevitably toward its most significant encounter yet. Craftworld Ulthwé translated from the webway at the Phoenix's projected trajectory, a massive vessel of wraithbone and psychic architecture that dwarfed even the largest Imperial ships. Eldrad Ulthrin stood upon the observation deck, his honor guard of warlocks beside him, and waited for the cosmic firebird to arrive. He did not wait long. The Phoenix manifested before Ulthwé with the same disregard for conventional physics it had shown everywhere else. One moment the void was empty. The next, a stellar phenomenon of impossible complexity filled the space before the craft world. Wings spread across thousands of kilometers, regarding the Eldar vessel with attention that felt simultaneously personal and utterly alien. "Great Phoenix," Eldrad spoke, his psychic voice carrying through the void. "I am Eldrad Ulthrin, Farseer of Craftworld Ulthwé, speaker for the Eldar who remember when the galaxy was young. We would speak with you if you will grant us this honor." The Phoenix's attention focused, and every Eldar on the Craftworld felt the weight of its regard. It was not hostile, but it was complete, looking at them with awareness that saw not just what they were, but what they had been and what they might become. "You are dying," the Phoenix observed, and the statement carried no judgment, merely fact. "Your race has been dying for 10,000 years. You cling to immortality through crystal prisons, denying the cycle its completion. Why?" Eldrad felt the question like a knife between his ribs. "Because we fear what comes after. Because Slaanesh waits in the warp to consume our souls. Because we are all that remains of an empire that spanned the galaxy, and we will not surrender the last embers of our civilization to the darkness. Slaanesh cannot consume what I have touched," the Phoenix stated. "The Chaos Gods learned this at Mauritania. But you already know this. You called me Asuria's echo. You recognize what I am." "Fragments only," Eldred admitted. "Legends from before the fall, when our gods still walked among us. The original fire, the first death, the primordial cycle. We named our greatest warriors Phoenix Lords in honor of something we barely remembered. And now you have come, and I do not know if you are our salvation or our extinction. I am neither. I am simply completion. Your race has lingered in death's doorway for millennia. I could push you through, allow your cycle to finish, let new life emerge from your ashes. Or..." The Phoenix paused, and Eldrad felt something in that pause. Consideration, perhaps. Curiosity. "Or you could choose transformation. True transformation, not the half measures of your wraithbone constructs and spirit stones. You could become something new, something that does not flee from death but embraces it as part of rebirth. You offer us what you offered the humans aboard those black ships," Eldrad said slowly, understanding dawning. "Not power, not salvation, but completion. The ability to die properly and be reborn as something else. Yes. But unlike the humans, your race remembers what it means to truly live. You could guide your own transformation instead of having it forced upon you. The choice is yours." Eldrad felt the weight of 10,000 years of Eldar survival pressing down upon him. Every decision since the fall had been about preservation, about maintaining what remained, about desperately clinging to existence against the dying of the light. And now this entity offered something no Eldar had dared to hope for, not survival, but genuine rebirth. "I cannot make this choice alone," he said. "This is a decision for all Eldar, across all craft worlds. But I will carry your message. I will show them what you offer. And perhaps, in time, we will find the courage to let go of what we were and discover what we might become. Time is not infinite," the Phoenix warned. "Your goddess of death stirs. Yniad grows closer to awakening. When it does, Your race will face transformation, whether you choose it or not. I offer you the chance to guide that transformation yourself." The entity began to withdraw, its attention already moving toward the next node of suffering it sensed in the galaxy. But before it departed completely, it left one final message. "Tell your people this: the cycle cannot be denied forever. Stagnation is not survival, and I will return to the Emperor soon. What happens then will reshape this galaxy forever. Decide where your people will stand when the old order burns away." Eldrad watched the Phoenix Force disappear into the quantum foam of reality, and for the first time in 3,000 years, he allowed himself to weep. Not from sorrow, not from fear, but from something he had thought lost to his people: hope. But across the galaxy, other forces had been watching. The Tyranid hive mind had calculated probabilities and found them unacceptable. The Necron Silent King had determined that the Phoenix represented a threat to the Great Work. The Imperium's High Lords had declared the entity excommunicate traitorous, to be destroyed at any cost. And in the warp, the four Chaos Gods had ceased their eternal conflicts and focused their combined malevolence on a single purpose. The Phoenix must be stopped before it could return to Terra and complete what it had started with the Emperor. The Phoenix Force continued its journey, unaware or uncaring of the gathering storm. It had learned what it needed to learn about this universe. It understood now why the Emperor could not simply be allowed to die. His death would doom humanity to extinction, or worse. But it also understood that his current state was a violation of everything the cycle represented. There was only one solution. The Emperor must die and be reborn, and the Phoenix would return to Terra to ensure it happened, regardless of the cost. Mira Castellan, standing on the poisoned world with her fellow Phoenix touched, felt the entity's decision through their connection and gasped. "It's going back. It's going to try to resurrect the Emperor, and every force in the galaxy is going to try to stop it." "Then we need to help," said another Phoenix touched. "We're the only ones who understand what it's trying to do. We're the only ones who felt what it truly is." Mira looked up at the toxic sky, feeling the power burning in her veins, the cosmic fire that had saved her from becoming mere fuel for a dying god. 3,000 of us against the entire Imperium, Chaos, the Xenos races, everything. We'll die. "Maybe," the older woman said with a grim smile. "But if the Phoenix is right, death is just part of the cycle. And maybe, just maybe, what comes after will be worth it." 3,000 Phoenix-touched psychers, scattered across 100 worlds, felt the call and began their journeys toward Terra. They would arrive too late to prevent the war, but perhaps in time to ensure that when the Phoenix completed its work, something beautiful would rise from the ashes. The galaxy held its breath, and the Emperor, on his golden throne, felt the Phoenix's approach and knew that 10,000 years of waiting were about to end. The Phoenix Force's return to Terra was heralded by omens that even the most skeptical Imperial officials could not ignore. The Astronomicon pulsed with rhythms it had never shown before, not failing, not weakening, but changing, as though the Emperor's psychic lighthouse was responding to something approaching. Across the Imperium, saints reported visions of a firebird descending upon the throne world, and whether these visions promised salvation or damnation, none could agree. The High Lords mobilized everything. Every battle barge within 3 months' warp travel was recalled to Sol. The Phalanx, still recovering from its failed attempt to stop the Phoenix's initial approach, prepared for a final stand. Entire Titan legions were awakened on Mars. The Grey Knights mustered their full 1,000-strong brotherhood. Even the Silent Sisterhood, the Null Maidens whose very existence negated psychic phenomena, prepared to face an entity that existed beyond their ability to nullify. Captain General Valoris stood once more at the Eternity Gate, But this time he was not alone. Beside him stood representatives of a dozen Space Marine chapters, inquisitors bearing artifacts dating back to the Emperor's own hand, and tech priests who had unearthed weapons from the dark age of technology, specifically for this moment. "It comes to kill the Emperor," Lord Inquisitor Covenant stated flatly, his bionic eye whirring as it tracked projected trajectories. "Everything it has done, the confrontation with Chaos, the transformation of the Psykers, the consultation with the Eldar, all of it was preparation for this moment. It will attempt to complete the Emperor's death cycle, and we must prevent that at any cost." "Even if it means destroying Terra itself?" Valoris asked quietly. Covenant's jaw tightened. "Even then, without the Emperor, humanity falls. It is that simple." But the Captain General was not convinced. He had stood in the Sanctum Imperialis when the Phoenix first touched the Golden Throne. He had felt the Emperor's response, not rage, not rejection, but something else. Recognition, perhaps, or resignation, or even acceptance. "What if," Valoris said slowly, choosing his words with care, "the Emperor wants this?" The silence that followed was deafening. "That is heresy," Covenant breathed. "That is truth," Valoris countered. "I have stood vigil over the Emperor for 3,000 years. I have felt his pain, his sacrifice, his endless agony. If there were another way, any other way, do you not think he would have found it? Perhaps the Phoenix offers what we cannot, genuine transformation instead of eternal suffering. Then we are already lost." The Phoenix Force arrived at Terra not as an invader, but as a returning storm, inevitable and unstoppable. It manifested in orbit above the throne world, and this time its presence was different. Where before it had been merely observing, now it was purposeful. Its cosmic form coiled around Terra like a serpent preparing to strike, and every psyker on the planet screamed simultaneously. In the warp, the four Chaos Gods watched with ravenous attention. They could not directly intervene on Terra. The Emperor's presence was too strong, his psychic might too concentrated. But if the Phoenix succeeded in killing him, if that momentary transition occurred, they would strike. The Phoenix might be immune to their corruption, but humanity was not. In that instant of vulnerability, the Imperium would fall. Except the Phoenix had anticipated this. From across the galaxy, 3,000 Phoenix-touched Psykers arrived simultaneously, translating into real space through pathways that should not exist, emerging from quantum possibilities that the entity had woven specifically for this purpose. They appeared in orbit around Terra, forming a protective sphere between the planet and the warp, their combined power creating a barrier that burned with the Phoenix's own fire. Mira Castellan felt the connection to her fellow transformed Psykers and understood their purpose instantly. "We're not here to fight the Imperium," she broadcast on all frequencies. "We're here to ensure that when the transformation happens, chaos cannot interfere. We're the Phoenix's gift to humanity, protection during our most vulnerable moment." "Stand down immediately," came the response from Battlefleet Solar. "You are unauthorized in the Sol system. Withdraw or be destroyed." "Destroy us if you must," Mira replied calmly. "But know that we are all that stands between Terra and the full attention of the Chaos Gods. Kill us, and you doom yourselves." The standoff held for 17 minutes. Then the Phoenix Force moved. It descended through Terra's atmosphere like a meteor that had achieved consciousness, passing through orbital defenses as though they were merely decorative. Lance strikes phased through its form. Nova cannons fired shots that the entity simply absorbed and converted into more of its own energy. The Phoenix touched held their positions, maintaining their barrier against the warp, even as Imperial forces tried to decide whether to fight them or the cosmic entity they claimed to protect. The Phoenix reached the Imperial Palace and did something it had not done before. It spoke directly to humanity in words they could understand, its voice resonating through every Vox system on Terra, heard by billions simultaneously. Children of the Emperor, I have come not as your enemy, but as the completion of a sacrifice that has lasted too long. Your father has suffered for 10,000 years so that you might survive. He has been both living and dead, trapped in agony beyond comprehension, denied the release of true death and the possibility of true rebirth. I offer him what you cannot, an ending that leads to beginning. He will die, but he will also return, transformed, renewed, more than he was. This is my purpose. This is the cycle. But I will not force this upon him. The choice must be his. And then the Phoenix Force did something that shocked every observer. It waited. It hung motionless above the Imperial Palace, neither advancing nor retreating, simply present, giving the Emperor himself the final decision. In the Sanctum Imperialis, upon the Golden Throne, the Master of Mankind stirred for the first time in millennia. His psychic presence, vast beyond human comprehension, reached out not to his Imperium, but to the Phoenix itself. And in that moment of contact, every psyker in the galaxy felt the conversation between God and cosmic force. The Emperor showed the Phoenix what humanity would become if he died improperly, the Astronomicon failing, the Webway Gate opening, demons flooding into the Imperial Palace, Terra burning, the Imperium fragmenting into 1,000 warring factions. He showed the trillions who would die, the civilizations that would fall, the darkness that would consume everything he had fought to preserve. The Phoenix acknowledged these truths. And then it showed the Emperor something else. It showed him what 10 more millennia of his current suffering would produce. An Imperium so rigid it could no longer adapt, so dogmatic it crushed innovation, so fearful it destroyed anything different. It showed him humanity not surviving, but merely persisting, trapped in their own cycle of stagnation, slowly dying across 10,000 years instead of all at once. Your sacrifice has given them time, the Phoenix communicated, but time alone is not enough. They must evolve, or they will die regardless, and they cannot evolve while you remain frozen in this moment. I offer you death and rebirth. Your Imperium will face crisis. Many will die, but those who survive will be stronger, will be capable of true change, will be able to face the darkness, not with desperate endurance, but with genuine hope. The choice is yours, Emperor of Mankind. Continue as you are, or trust in the cycle. Trust that what dies may rise again. The galaxy held its breath, and the Emperor, who had orchestrated the Great Crusade, who had built the Webway, who had fought Horus on the Vengeful Spirit, who had sat upon the Golden Throne for 10,000 years in agony beyond description, made his choice. Do it. The Phoenix Force struck, not with violence, not with destruction, but with completion. It enveloped the Golden Throne in cosmic fire that burned away the distinction between life and death, past and future, ending and beginning. The Emperor's body, ancient and withered, disintegrated into golden light. His psychic presence, vast enough to hold back the warp itself, dispersed into quantum probability. For 17 seconds, the Astronomicon went dark. Across the Imperium, navigators screamed. Ships in the warp were lost. Astropaths felt the absence of their god emperor like a physical wound. The Webway Gate, held closed for 10 millennia by the Emperor's will alone, burst open, and demons poured forth into the Imperial Palace. But the Phoenix Touched were ready. 3,000 psychers, empowered by cosmic fire, held the demonic tide at the palace's threshold. They could not close the gate, only the Emperor could do that, but they could delay it, could buy precious seconds for the transformation to complete. On Terra, riots erupted. Millions cried out in terror and despair. The Emperor was dead. Their god had fallen. The Imperium was doomed. And then, on the 18th second, something impossible happened. From the ashes of the Golden Throne, from the quantum possibilities where the Phoenix had scattered the Emperor's essence, something new began to form. Not the corpse Emperor of 10,000 years, not the man who had walked ancient Terra before the Age of Strife, but something that was both and neither, a being of pure psychic energy given form through the Phoenix's fire, existing simultaneously in the Materium and the Warp, a god reborn. The Astronomicon reignited, but it burned differently now, brighter, clearer. And across the galaxy, every human soul felt the presence of their Emperor in a way they never had before, not as a distant, dying father, but as a living force of protection and purpose. The reborn Emperor raised his hand, solid yet ethereal, material yet psychic, and the webway gate slammed shut with finality that would last until the galaxy's end. The demons that had emerged were burned away by golden fire that made even the Phoenix's flames look dim. "I have returned," the Emperor's voice resonated across Terra and beyond, heard by every human in every sector simultaneously. "I have died and been reborn. And in my rebirth, I bring change. The Imperium will no longer be an empire of stagnation, but a civilization of growth. We will no longer merely survive, we will thrive. The Phoenix has given us what we needed, transformation. Now we must prove worthy of it." The Phoenix Force regarded its work and felt something approaching satisfaction. The cycle had been completed. The Emperor had died and been reborn into something greater. And humanity, though they would face challenges ahead, now had genuine hope instead of mere endurance. "My purpose here is fulfilled," the Phoenix broadcast to the galaxy. The cycle continues. What you make of this gift is your choice. And with that, the cosmic entity began to fade, its presence diminishing as it prepared to depart this universe for whatever lay beyond. But before it left completely, it turned its attention to the 3,000 Phoenix-touched Psykers who had protected Terra during humanity's most vulnerable moment. "You have proven yourselves worthy," it told them. "You may keep the fire I have given you. Use it well. Guide your species through the transformation to come. Be the first generation of humanity's new age." Mira Castellan felt tears streaming down her face as the Phoenix's presence faded from her mind. They had succeeded. Against all odds, against the entire galaxy's resistance, they had helped facilitate something impossible: the Emperor's rebirth. On Terra, Valoris knelt before the transformed Emperor, and for the first time in 3,000 years, felt something other than grim duty in his heart. His master had returned, renewed, and the Imperium would follow. In the Warp, the Chaos Gods raged at their failure, but even they could not deny what had occurred. The cycle had turned, and a new age had begun. And across the galaxy, every faction that had prepared to exploit humanity's weakness during the Emperor's death found themselves facing something they had not anticipated. Not a collapsing Imperium, but a transformed one, led by a god reborn, protected by Phoenix-touched warriors, standing at the threshold of genuine evolution. The transformation of the Emperor rippled across the galaxy like a shockwave through still water, and in its wake, nothing remained unchanged. Within a year, the Imperium began its metamorphosis. The reborn Emperor, existing simultaneously in the Materium and the Warp, no longer required the sacrifice of 10,000 Psykers daily. The black ship still sailed, but now they carried students rather than fuel. Individuals who would be taught by the Phoenix-touched how to wield their power without corruption, how to understand the cycle of death and rebirth that protected against chaos rather than invited it. The Adeptus Ministorum faced a crisis of faith as their doctrine of the Emperor's eternal suffering became obsolete. Some adapted, preaching transformation and renewal. Others clung to the old ways and were quietly marginalized by a population that had felt their god's rebirth and knew in their souls that change had come. The ecclesiarchy would survive, but it would never again wield the absolute authority it once had. The Space Marines, those transhuman warriors who had served for 10,000 years, found themselves facing a choice similar to what the Phoenix had offered the Emperor. They could remain as they were, powerful but stagnant, or they could accept transformation. The Phoenix Touched offered them something unprecedented, the ability to evolve beyond even the Primarch's design, to become not just warriors, but guardians of humanity's new age. Some chapters accepted, others refused. The Imperium, for the first time in millennia, accommodated both. Mira Castellan stood on the observation deck of what had once been the Penitent Redemption, now rechristened Phoenix's Promise, and watched Terra turn beneath her. The planet glowed with renewed vigor, its hives being rebuilt not as monuments to grim survival, but as cities where humans might actually thrive. She and her fellow Phoenix Touched had become something unexpected, not rulers, not conquerors, but teachers and guardians, showing humanity how to embrace change without losing themselves. "Do you think we did the right thing?" asked one of her companions, watching the reconstruction efforts below. Mira considered the question carefully. "The Phoenix showed us that stagnation is just slow death. We gave the Imperium a chance to truly live. Whether they take that chance, whether they prove worthy of it, that's up to them now." The Xenos races watched humanity's transformation with varying degrees of concern and calculation. The Eldar, through Eldrad's guidance, entered tentative negotiations with the Imperium for the first time in 10,000 years. If humanity could be reborn, perhaps there was hope for the Eldari as well. The Tau saw opportunity in the chaos of change, expanding their borders while the Imperium reorganized. The Necrons observed with cold calculation, adjusting their own strategies for the great work. And the Tyranids continued their approach, but even the hive mind recognized that humanity had become something more dangerous than before, not through greater numbers or weapons, but through adaptation and hope. The Chaos Gods, denied their moment of triumph, turned their malevolence toward new strategies. They could not corrupt the Phoenix's fire, could not undo the Emperor's rebirth, but they could still tempt, still corrupt, still offer their dark gifts to those who would listen. The war between order and chaos had not ended. It had merely entered a new phase. In the deepest vaults beneath the Imperial Palace, the reborn Emperor stood before a single, unadorned mirror, one of the few artifacts that predated even his original birth. The face that looked back at him was both familiar and strange. Features he had worn during the Great Crusade, yes, but refined by cosmic fire, marked by transformation, bearing eyes that had seen death and come through to the other side. He had been many things across his impossibly long existence: warlord, scientist, philosopher, tyrant, sacrifice. Now he was something new, a god who had died and been reborn, who understood the cycle in a way he never had before. His Imperium would change because he had changed. Whether that change would save humanity or doom them remained to be seen. But for the first time in 10,000 years, he felt something he had thought lost forever: genuine possibility. The Phoenix Force, its work in this universe complete, had departed for realms beyond mortal comprehension. But it had left behind more than just the Emperor's rebirth and the Phoenix-touched psychers. It had left a fundamental truth that could never be unlearned. The cycle could not be denied. Stagnation was not strength, and transformation, though terrifying, was the only path to genuine survival. The 41st millennium would still be dark, wars would still rage. Billions would still die in the grinding machinery of galactic conflict. But now, Beneath the darkness, a flame burned that could not be extinguished, the promise that what died might be reborn, that what ended might begin again, that even in the grim darkness of the far future, hope itself could be renewed. The Emperor protects, the old saying went. But now humanity whispered a new prayer as well. The Emperor transforms. And in transformation, we find not an ending, but a beginning. The galaxy turned, the stars burned, and the eternal cycle continued. Death and rebirth, ending and beginning. The ancient dance that the Phoenix had reminded them all was not a curse to be feared, but a truth to be embraced. 3,000 Phoenix-touched psychers scattered across the Imperium, carrying fire that would never go out, teaching humanity that change was not heresy, but necessity. The reborn Emperor walked among his people again, not as a distant dying father, but as a living force of transformation and protection. And somewhere, in the quantum possibilities between universes, the Phoenix Force observed its work and moved on to the next galaxy, the next civilization, the next cycle requiring completion. In the end, the question was never whether the Phoenix would change the 41st millennium. The question was whether humanity would have the courage to change with it. The answer, written in golden fire across 10,000 worlds, was a resounding yes.